Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit ActiveDay.com to apply.
Now, Positively Ernie with Ernie and Estes, a New York TV legend and radio host with great positive stories and interviews.
Thanks, Ernie. You're the best.
And now, here's Ernie.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. We are back, and I've got another exciting story for you today out of a very interesting person, somebody I've known for a long time. And she's got a fantastic book. She and a bunch of people who have come together to bring stories. I mean, and you're going to hear about some of the incredible stories that they've produced. The book is called The Moth. It's presenting the point of beauty. And it's true stories of holding on and letting go. This is a fabulous book. Bestseller on the New York Times list. I want you to welcome Suzanne Rust, who is one of the editors. Hi, Suzanne.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you here. You are so proud of this. This is the fourth anthology, right?
Yes, I'm so proud of it.
This is great. I mean, people are going to sit back and they're going to say, wait a minute, these are stories that you have collected, right?
Yes.
But you got to tell me how you did it. What was the process in putting, 50 stories.
Yes, 50 stories. It's a huge process because we looked at over 400 stories.
Wow.
And you've got to understand that we have live events, Ernie. So
yeah.
We have live main stage events that are curated. We have 5 storytellers. We have story slams. We have many ways that stories come to us. So we have quite a huge catalog. And they're stories that we have loved for years that, we thought would look great on the page, but not all of them do.
How did you get the stories?
Event.
How did you get these stories?
The stories come about. I'm one of the curators. I am the curator, but, the directors also look for stories.
Right.
Different places. It could be that I run into someone at a dinner party that has a really intriguing story, and I ask them if they'd be interested in sharing it with a wider audience.
Wow.
I see people on the news that are fascinating. I look for local tellers in smaller markets where our shows go to, and I look for locals, so I'll look through the newspapers and see if someone might have a story, and cold calling, and just people who aren't storytellers necessarily.
Are there any particular kinds of stories you're looking for, or you look for the variety?
Variety. It really is. Everything starts with the story, whatever it is. It's there are just such a wide range of stories. We look for the stories first, and we don't want anyone to feel pigeonholed into any type of story. We have every type of story in our, on our main stages in our books. So it's not a particular thing. What it has to be is a true personal story. It has to be about you. There have to be stakes. What did you stand to gain or lose? And there has to be some moment of change, big or small. That is the criteria for a moth story. Otherwise, it can veer into anecdote territory.
So you've got celebrities, you have astronauts, you have people from all walks of life.
Yes.
Give me an idea. People are saying, okay, tell me who's in the book and what kind of a story did they tell you?
Well, we have everything. Like I said, we have historical stories. We have a woman who was part of the Little Rock Nine. We have a Vietnam vet who finds, I don't want to give anything away, but he finds a shirt that he left at the monument in the Smithsonian.
Oh,
we have the history stories. We have gut punch stories. We have a woman who's lost her son in the Sandy Hook tragedy. We have someone who was in the Pulse shooting. We have funny stories. We have a woman whose family was obsessed with the Kennedys. And watched them on the beach where they were, and they had a brush with the actual Kennedys. We have a funny story of a prom gone wrong. A gentleman got his hair straightened really badly, horrible outfits. So we have humor, we have the gut punch.
Yeah, you have a variety.
We have complete variety.
How long are the stories? I mean, are they 4 pages, 5 pages? How long are they to read?
A few pages, but when they're told, they should be 10 to 12 minutes if they're a main stage story. Those are kind of main.
And it's in first person? They're
yes,
telling
they're
the story
in first
themselves.
person, and our slam stories are 5 minutes. So you have a few slam stories in there, so the pages, they're never very long. But it was tricky coming down from 400 to 50. It was heartbreaking. I mean, it was so difficult, and a good difficult, but it was a challenge for
Let me just jump around a little bit because we're going to come back to the stories.
Yes.
The process of putting that together. I mean, we are in the news business. You were with Family Circle magazine for many years.
Yes.
And you've done so many things. You're a journalist. So we both understand how much effort it takes to take a story and start editing, putting it together, and so forth. What kind of a staff do you have?
We were 5 of us working on the book.
5 of you.
But the stories come from different directors.
Right.
But we sat and we read through all of these stories. and to see which was we tried to find a balance. You know, you can't have all sad stories, you can't have all funny stories.
Right.
You want to diversify who's telling the stories, so you just really want to make sure everyone feels like they're hearing something special. So that's kind of the criteria which we start. You know, just make sure we have a good balance. And then looking at them, and the ironic thing was there were many stories that we adored that have been, you know, on stages all over the country.
Yeah.
That you're like, oh, that'll be a shoo-in. But then you get it on paper. This is the different thing. You get it on paper, and it's some of them were like, oh, that works better in audio. That doesn't really work. And that was a shocker. That was my surprise. But don't forget, you can't edit them like you're editing a magazine article or a book.
True.
These stories have to be authentic to the storyteller. So little tiny tweaks, but you can't it's like, oh, that ending would have been better if they'd done X, Y, and Z. That's their ending. You got to go with it. So that was the challenge.
Did you put them in categories?
We did.
Yeah.
We did. Very loose. You'll see some of the title headings are very kind of quirky and funny. So we wanted to kind of broad strokes, but just kind of humorous, you know, about identity and finding place, you know. So they are categories, but they're not rigid categories.
I'm curious because I know people are watching right now, and they heard me say at the very beginning, the moth. Where did the name come from?
Yes, well, our founder was a writer named George Dawes Green, and he lived in St. Simon's Island in Georgia.
Yeah.
And he'd sit out with his friends in the patio and the summer nights and tell stories, and the moths would gather around the porch light, and they'd come through those little hole in the netting and gather around. And so he went from there, and when he moved to New York, he decided to create these salons where people could just tell a story, and everyone had to be quiet and listen
Wow.
to do that. And then from there,
it.
we grew. And, you know, we've been around for 27 years. We do over 600 stories and shows a year.
That's
incredible. We've got the radio and the podcast.
You're in different countries. You're everywhere.
Yeah, we just did our first Spanish language show in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
We were just in South Africa. We have a global program, so we do, you know, stories with people in India and Sri Lanka.
Oh, Suzanne, I'm so proud of you guys.
It's just everywhere.
But it's so important to be able to get stories like this out there. And storytelling is so basic and so fundamental. You know, before there was television, you know, families would sit around, and grandmother, grandfather, whoever, an uncle, would sit and tell a story and share that kind of history. And we've lost a lot of that. I know technology is good in many ways, but it's also taken away from that opportunity to just talk and just show the story in a different way. But having it in writing like this, to me, is very important. I'm looking at this, Survive, Then Live by Patience Murray.
Yeah, that's the tough one.
What was this story
about?
Yeah.
The Pulse nightclub shooting. Patience went to Florida for the first time by herself. She hadn't told her parents that she was going on a trip and wound up at that nightclub, Pulse nightclub, when there was that horrible shooting.
What a tragedy.
And she, you know, survived it.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a tough one, you know, but important story.
Okay, I'm looking at your book now, Dancing in the Bazaar. What's that about?
Okay.
What's that about?
That story by Manisa, and actually that's a good story that you pulled out, because Manisa she worked in the corporate America, and she wanted to make a difference somehow, and she didn't know how. And she read about this bookstore in Karachi, Pakistan, that was closing, this like epic, beautiful bookstore.
Yeah.
And she's like, maybe I could do something to save this bookstore. I don't know. And so she
really?
just goes there, and they're like, who are you? You know? But she does. She manages to clean it up and get funds going for it. So she lets this beautiful bookstore survive. And the title of the book comes from Manisa's story. It's like finding a point of beauty. You know, even the chaos and ugliness, there's always a point of beauty, which we love that title because the world is constantly in a state of flux and difficulty. And if you can just kind of settle down with the story and just have that quiet time to kind of reflect on humanity and connect or feel seen, then we've done our job.
You know how important it is, you know, to be able to share human interest stories like that.
It's so important. And live. There's something really beautiful. Also in the live, the books are great too, but if you come to one of our events, it's a captive audience. You know, you're
describe that a little bit, because people are wondering, you know, if it's a live event, storytelling?
Yes.
Okay,
it's
explain
storytelling.
that.
So our main stage, I told you, we have our slams where people drop their name in a hat. It's not rehearsed. There's nothing. They get up and tell a story. The main stage stories there are 5 storytellers. They work with a director to develop their story. So it has like a very clear beginning, middle, and end. It has all the stakes that we talked about. So they get up on stage and tell a 10 to 12-minute story about their lives. Again, full range. And you just sit there quietly. They can't have notes. They don't have props. They stand still in front of a mic. They're not like pacing and walking.
It's all from the heart.
Yeah, so you're just there in this quiet, and you feel the heartbeat. Like, it's just this connection that it's so powerful. And like there's a point. It's either you've heard something you've never heard before from a point of view, and you go, wow, I never thought of that before. Or you're like, oh my God, I didn't know anyone else felt this way. Yeah. So there's always something that connects, right?
Absolutely.
Whether it's just the novelty of it or that connection. And it's just, there's few things more gorgeous to me than that. You know?
Simple and pure.
Yeah.
You know, we both admire children. We love kids. And, you know, I'm just wondering, are there stories in here for children?
There's stories that could be read to children, I'd say, but it's not
mostly,
for that.
Mostly
they're
for
adults,
reading.
but they're, you know, I think if I were to pick, I could probably go there and edit a few.
Well, you know, here we are brainstorming. Have you thought about maybe doing something, another version?
I've thought about it.
Kids say the darnest things. There was a TV show like that.
I know.
Once,
well, we have our education program.
Yeah.
And we do have high school students telling stories, and they're wonderful. I mean, often they're about their siblings or because they haven't lived that long, but they have beautiful stories. There's one in there about a young woman who used to make an apple cake with her grandfather all the time, and he started to become senile and didn't remember the recipe, so she had to carry on. So that's a gorgeous story. And we have a podcast called Grown, which is for, because we're never really grown, right?
Okay.
It's about younger people. We have two young hosts that kind of their stories, a little more youth focused. So we definitely value the stories of youth. And a lot of moth-tellers tell stories about their youth, like they tell it as if it's the time when they happened when they were children.
Look,
so
you know what's really beautiful about a child? There's such innocence there.
Yes.
And whenever they're telling you something, especially when they're very young, it is just so from the heart.
Yeah, definitely
and you can't help but just hold these kids up and hug them because, they're just giving you something that they just feel and understand at that level.
Right. And at this point, it's also the vulnerability, which is also one of our main posts, and us being vulnerable is the kind of the core of a moth story. We want to hear what happened to you. We don't want to hear, I was so great and I did this thing. It's like, okay, that's nice. It's like, go write a book about it. It's like, but when you come to us, we want to hear all the cracks. We want to hear how you got through.
Sure.
And so if people aren't willing to be vulnerable, it's usually difficult to get them to tell a story. And not everybody does. Like they think they do, and the directors start working with them and digging. It's like, well, tell me more about how you felt when your mother said that. And they they'll freeze up. It's like,
almost like a psychiatrist, a psychologist.
It totally
when you're sitting there trying to pull out all this information
100%.
From somebody.
So not everyone's ready for that, which is fine. And some people come to us later. They let me think on that. Or if something has happened that's very intense, some people tend to want to tell that story right away. And it's like, you're not ready to tell that. Like, let it marinate for a while.
Suzanne, I've got some good stories to tell you.
Well, I think you should tell a story.
Let me tell you something. I've got some very interesting stories to tell.
I mean,
not only, covering news for so many years. I mean, personal stories about personalities that I've interviewed and so forth and experiences that I've had, but also personal stories of my own life and encounters that I've had that have really helped me to grow and understand life better.
Yeah, well.
Those are great stories. Now, we were talking about...
I can connect you,
Okay, we're going to set it up.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But D.C. politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
We were talking about children. I saw this one here. It said, "It's your job to hold your baby."
Oh, yeah.
Warren Holman.
Yeah, that is a beautiful story.
Tell me a little bit about that story.
Yeah. So Warren grew up in a family that was very emotionally rigid. There was no emotional hugs. There was nothing, frighteningly so. And he, felt that growing up. It changes how you behave in the world. And his wife, they had a baby. And they also had a friend who was in the hospital dying of AIDS. And they go to visit him, his wife and baby, and the young man's mother is in the room, sitting far away, not facing her son, not having any emotional connection to her son. And they were just so struck and so hurt by that, that he took his baby, because they knew he knew this gentleman well.
Okay.
And the gentleman knew the baby was coming. And he put the baby in his arms. And the gentleman kind of woke up, and he was, obviously not in a good place, but he held this baby. And that's what it's about. It's about that human connection and not being afraid to approach people and to be there for people.
Exactly.
And, let go of how you grew up. Try to shake that and just be there for people. It's really beautiful.
It must have been very emotional for you and the other editors to be going through a lot of these stories and listening to them. Oh, no, I'm sure you had put a lot of time and effort into it. Cried.
It's a lot of crying.
Very emotional.
They're beautiful. I mean, there's some of them really are emotional, and it's no matter how many times I hear them, I can also just feel all those feelings again. That one's a good one.
You've done so well with this. By the way, congrats. I think
Thank
I mentioned
you.
it at the top. New York
you.
Times bestseller.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
It feels great because I'll tell you that we do our work. This one we had to do it kind of quickly, quick turnaround. And we're doing our regular jobs as well. So it's like, okay, we have a book meeting from 10 to 12. Okay. Yeah. And then lunch. And then you're back to the other stuff. And another book meeting. And you're doing it and you're loving it. But you're in the moment. You don't really realize you're writing a book, of course, putting together a book. But
Sure.
then once it's done, you're like, oh, it's a thing. Here it is. And then it's like, oh, it's a thing that people like. Oh, it's a thing the New York Times likes. And we're also on Amazon's list. And
this is
USA
so good.
Today, so we're moving through it really well. And we're just really proud of it to get the stories out there. We think they're important. We think they change lives. We think that makes you a better person to hear people's stories.
Absolutely.
The empathy factor goes up, and
I wanted to ask you about feedback because I'm sure you've heard from a lot of people, who've read the book. What are you getting from folks who have read a lot of these stories? What are they telling you?
They just feel that they're beautiful stories, and they just help you know people better. You just understand where people are coming from better. Like I said, if it's something you're not familiar with, you're learning about it. Just things I never thought. Like I don't have tons of people that I know that are incarcerated or in the system, right? I just don't.
Yes.
And we have stories from people from that community, and you're like, I never thought of that. Like just certain points of view. That's just one example. There's so many, but I just feel like I've become a better person just hearing all of these stories because these aren't necessarily people you know.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't know people from different communities, but when you read the stories, you're really kind of up close personal with these stories. It's not like reading a news article or you're listening to someone intently, and it's just like, oh man, I'm like, God, this is my blind spot. I need to hear more of these stories because now I feel a little differently about X, Y, and Z.
Let's talk a little bit about this, okay? Because, a lot of people who would love to be in this book, okay? But we want to encourage people to be able to share their own story with their family, with their friends. Let's try to help those people who are listening, watching us right now and saying, maybe I should do more of that. Maybe I should spend more time with my family and just tell them the story.
Yes.
Rather than not telling them or having them watch it on TV or whatever it happens to be, a personal story. Let's talk about encouraging people to do that.
Absolutely. Whenever you're with your family, I know not everyone has, amicable family situations, but, if you have older people that are, might not be around long, think of a question you might have for them because you're not going to get a chance to do that later, and as young people, think of stories you want your parents to know. Like, what is something you don't get to talk about?
Yes.
We actually have a moth game, that has little
cards. Oh, really? It's
a
game? Okay,
yes.
How does that work?
They're just different questions, different prompts. Like, tell us about a time you lost control.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a fun way to get things started.
Yes.
Our little game is great.
I like that.
And on our website, we have prompts and things because people can pitch stories on we have a pitch line. It's audio. You can leave a 2 to 3 minute pitch.
Okay.
Or, you can write it down. But we like the audio pitches. And we do listen to all of them. We get thousands and thousands.
So there's an opportunity out there.
Everyone can pitch their story to us at themoth.org and just, come to a slam. It's it's scary, of course, but it's exhilarating. Maybe the theme is fear, and you think, what story do I have that time I was really scared?
Sure.
And you kind of run it through, and then you get there, you drop your name in a hat, cross your fingers, see if you get to go up and tell it, and then we listen to all those. Some of them go to the main stage. Some of them wound up in that book.
Yeah.
We had a story from a woman who pitched a Vietnamese immigrant. Her family came here. They were kind of lost, and they opened a banh mi sandwich shop, and they became, friends with their neighbors, and just this kind of beautiful thing. And she pitched it on the pitch line. I was like, this could be interesting. I think this is a good one.
Great.
And then it followed through with many main stages, and then she's in the book. So it's.
I can't tell you how much I'm enjoying this. This is really great. I'm sure that our listeners and viewers are getting the same out of it. And I think I've shared this before on the air, and it's important to make sure that we pass along the names of our family.
Yes.
Stories from our family so that it has some life to it long after we're gone.
Yes.
And that time comes for all of us. Mm-hmm. But, I remember reading one time that we have some things from our parents, photographs, for example, or a memory that we might share. One of the things that we don't have is their handwriting.
Right.
We don't have a lot of handwritten information or letters or cards or stories from our parents or our grandparents.
Right.
So I ended up buying a book, and it asks questions like your
And
game.
you write them in.
Yeah, like, who was your best friend when you were growing up? Who was your favorite teacher?
That's great.
And I ended up writing in my own hand, I wrote the stories with a picture attached to it so that my kids will be able to have that, and hopefully,
That's helpful. You
great
must have good
grandchildren.
handwriting, because my handwriting is horrible. No one would be able to read what I wrote after I was gone.
But they would still love that. They would still
it's true.
appreciate that.
It's
but,
true.
But these are the fundamentals. These are the basics. Listen, I know that life has changed dramatically. And with technology, it's just a whole different world. But there are still some fundamentals that I think are evergreen. Mm-hmm. And telling stories and putting them in a book or a journal or sharing them, I think is so important for us to maintain and perpetuate that.
It really is. And I think I may have shared this with you one other time, but like, for me, my mother passed away when I was just 21, so she never got to see my kids, my dad as well, but they did get to meet him, but they never met my mother. But I have so many stories about her that I've shared with them, like just stupid, little, silly, funny things. But they know so many of these stories, and it really keeps her alive, Like, I celebrate her birthday, we talk about her, it's like, it's very natural for me and very important for me that they know who she was through, something that happened to her when she was in high school or somewhere. Yeah. And they repeat them back to me, so I know they've heard them. And I think that's really important. I know it doesn't come naturally to everyone, but it's so nice, because if someone's not around, you can kind of bring them back,
You sure
bring
can.
them into the room with you.
Bring them into something that really is important.
Yes.
Okay, so The Moth presents A Point of Beauty, True Stories of Holding On and Letting Go. This is a fabulous New York Times bestseller and a lot of other things going on. You know what, Suzanne Rust, you're a terrific guest.
Oh, thank you.
No, you really are. And you have a podcast as well.
Yes. So the Moth Radio Hour and podcast.
And if people, by the way, want to contribute or they want you to read a story, tell us again where they go.
So you can go to themoth.org. Yeah. And then scroll through the different things. If you have a story you want to pitch, you can go to our pitch line and leave it there. You can see the events we have coming up. We have a show in New York on the 24th of May at Skirball.
24th of May.
Yeah, at Skirball Center. April. 24th of April at Skirball
April 24th,
yes.
okay.
And
where's it again in New York?
That's downtown in NYU, Skirball Center. Yeah, so that's for New York. But if you look, you can just find events across the country. We're coming. We have slams every week. We have main stage every month.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so there's definitely a way to participate. We have several books. And, we'd love people to pitch stories.
We love it.
Suzanne,
you were a great guest, and you told your story well today.
Thank you.
You did a great job on this thing.
Thank you, Ernie.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing
it
with us. Okay, congratulations on your book. Come back again, and we'll talk some more.
Happily.
Suzanne Rust, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed today's show. Tell somebody a story. Don't forget to do that. Very important. See you next time. Bye-bye.